говорить на русском языке, потому что I can have a professional talk only with you guys in English. Я никогда не изучал русского, но я как будто не знаю как, но понимаю, что вы говорите, но не могу читать, не могу писать. Вот. So I'll switch to English now. I come from Adform. We have a nice office here in Minsk. 80 plus people. I have a few colleagues here. Nice to see you guys. In Adform, I'm heading the PMO, Project Management Office. We provide structures, frameworks, tools, education, whatever is necessary for our agile teams to be as successful as possible. And today I'll speak to you on a topic which is, on the slide is hybrid project management. Very cool buzzword. It has been a cool buzzword for a couple of years already. It's my third time I give this speech. The first I've done in 2012, and since then I believe many guys had been talking about the same hybrid, how to compile agile, waterfall things. So I met Vladimir, who will be giving his speech quite soon. I met him here, and he participated in all of those. 2012, I think another time I gave an agile tour Vilnius last year, 15, and he was also there. So he approached me today and he said, "Hey, will you give the same speech again?" I was like, "Yeah, I can promise you the last time." But you will understand why. So before we move on, may I ask who can dare to raise a hand in this room and say, "I have been doing a purely waterfall project in my career"? One brave man. Two? Okay, 2, 3, 4. Okay, waterfall. Okay. Because I thought how to start this discussion, and I was considering to start it from a rhetoric question. How many times have you heard in any conference or related to Agile or project management in general, people speaking and comparing Agile and Waterfall? Too many times. And I do it today, and Dimitri did it, and Thomas did it a little bit, and a few of us did it already here. And I have quite a few slides doing the same comparison again. But I'm pretty tired of that, because I think that this is already this type of discussion it's getting little by little out of date, and therefore I decided to do this, like comparing Agile waterfall things for the last time. Simply why? Waterfall is dead, and the question who has been doing or who has done a purely waterfall project in their career was related to this statement. I think the waterfall as a framework, as a methodology, and we could again we will not deep dive into discussion whether it's a framework or a methodology or a philosophy, because we will get very academic. I give lectures in the Vilnius University on project management, but you are no longer students, guys, right? So we don't have to go there. So I think waterfall is dead, and whenever we do this comparison, we have to be very sure what do we compare. Is this comparison integral at all? Are we comparing a car with a car, or we are comparing a car with a boat? Because both of them are okay, right? The boat is for the trip on the water, and the car is for the trip on asphalt or anywhere on other type of the surface, right? So, and both are okay to get from the point A to the point B. You can still travel, just different conditions. So when I hear or when I read, let's say, this type of statements, like in 2011, the famous chaos report, and they say Agile succeeded 3 times more than often than Waterfall. And again, are we still comparing the same things? Are we comparing the car with the boat? Is it the right thing to do? And then when anyone is saying the waterfall, I always feel like, okay, so what do you mean by waterfall? Because Dmitry was saying the waterfall by the stereotype is like PMBOK. So he was comparing waterfall with the PMBOK, and we have seen some slides, the screenshots from PMBOK explaining almost the same things which are represented by or communicated by the Agile communities, almost the same values. So how, okay, when you say waterfall fails, how did you measure it? I mean, how did you define the success criteria of the project? And I can give you a very short example from the history point of view. Titanic. You remember, it wasn't the project management discipline at that time, but people kept doing the projects. Great China Wall Pyramids, they're all projects, but without a real project manager, right? So was Titanic a successful project or a failure? Well, it depends on the scope. Was the first trip, was it part of the scope of the project, or scope was completed when the ship was launched into the water with the testing? So it depends on that. So I think all these reports are more like stereotypical and made for people who like hearing things. And we like to hear, it's easy to make friends when we have a common enemy. And in this type of conferences, Agile related conferences, I always feel like we have one common enemy, and we call this common enemy Vadapad, waterfall, without really understanding what we're saying. So we have 4 or 5, I forgot the number, but we have quite few people who claim they have done projects using the waterfall, and probably all the rest of you, I assume, have been doing the Agile projects. So today, yeah, I forgot I have a few more questions here, but let's run quickly through them. Which aspects of waterfall are you referring to when you said that you did the project waterfall way? So let's say, are you referring to over-reliance on documentation? So we spoke about the necessity for every waterfall project to do, or PMBOK project to do, the loads of documentation before we actually kick off. The phase gate approach, design, gate approval, execute, go live, and all these phases with the gates. Are we referring to the difficult change control or change management process? Because Dmitry just said, well, we do have change management. We can have change management in Agile project. We can change a waterfall project with a change request. We do have this mechanism available. So it could be that we express our opinion about how difficult this process is, but this process in Agile world can be as difficult as in a waterfall. So the tendency to plan an entire project in detail before starting. Another stereotypical opinion when we refer to word waterfall. But it doesn't mean that an Agile project shouldn't be planned. Yes. Okay, so first time doing speech in Minsk, first time doing speech on Saturday, first time doing speech using microphone, like this. 3 things. Okay, again, attempt to complete all of the project requirements all at once. I think I'm not going to deep dive into all of them here because Dmitry already had these stereotypes revealed or criticized little by little. So let's move forward. And we could say that Agile is the silver bullet, but it's not. And probably Agile projects exist now everywhere except the construction, but I just took one nice example from Vilnius. This is the Constitution prospect here in Vilnius, and this is Agile construction, which we can sample. If you go to Vilnius, guys, you should see that. You see that half of the building is built and another half of the building is still, I would say, on hold or in progress. Doesn't matter, but they did it in the Agile way, right? So when someone says that Agile doesn't exist in construction, I always give them this example, of course, in a funny way, not serious. I think the company went bankrupt and that's it. Okay, so hybrid project management. It's all about excellence, right? But when we speak about excellence, we have to start from the context. So if I'm now a fanatic Agile promoter, and I tell you a case study where I had a successful Agile project, a lot of guys in the room just sit and like really truly believe what I say without asking questions like this. And I just say why the context matters. Okay, so you said that your project was successful, right? So what is the size of your organization? Are you like working for the enterprise where you have 90,000 people in an organization, or are you working in a small bureau where you have 10 guys? What was the case? The second question could be, who is the requester of the project? Do you have like obligatory contract made with an external requester and then you do the project for the external requester, or is this project for your internal stakeholders? Then the question about the budget, right? Are we speaking about the project which is 10,000 euro, or we speak about the project which is 5 million euro? Because probably there is a difference, and the risk tolerance when we speak about project which is 2 million or 5 million euro, from the management point of view will be different from the project 10,000 euro worth in the budget. Because if someone approaches me and saying, hey Laimonas, I have a great idea, can I do it? An estimated budget for this idea realization is 10,000. So I just say, well, go and do it, no problem. Well, write down the small business case, but maybe that's not necessary, just try. Do the proof of concept. But if someone approaches me and says like 5 million euro, I would probably request a normal business case with a feasibility study to check whether this idea is feasible, and to check whether this idea is corresponding to the vision of the company where we go, strategy of the company, and all the things, because it's a big investment. Is it public or private project you've done? Because the projects we do for the private sector and the public sector, they differ because of the, all the objective reasons. What is the risk tolerance? And this is a little bit related with the culture, because the studies have shown that if we go a little bit east, like to the India and similar countries like that, the risk tolerance is way smaller than if we go to the West. Let's say the American-oriented culture is way more tolerant to the risks. So they tend to risk more, therefore Agile is easier there. The team, are we speaking about the team of 5 guys which sit in the same room, so you just give them the task and they work it out? Or was it the team of 100 or 200 people where you have to do the scrum of scrums and maybe apply some other frameworks we've been talking today already, like SAFe and less? Because if you have 100 people in your team, or maybe 200 people, we may have already different cultures, different time zones, different locations, different virtual communication tools, and similar stuff, which brings the complexity to another level. So when we say that project was successful or not, we cannot ignore this context. And then finally, the culture, but I will not deep dive here. I think those of you who guys have experience with working with the Indian culture, or let's say Western culture, you can definitely see the difference in how you split up the tasks, how you delegate, how you micromanage, how you do the micromanagement and similar things. So this is just for you to start thinking about the context whenever you get any information about successful or not successful methodology, because there is no one tool to fit all. Because if you want to try one methodology, you could end up as a Swiss Army knife. It does everything, but it's not good at anything. So the context matters. The second thing I wanted to do is to look back into the PMBOK, the famous PMBOK, which describes what project management is, because I speak today about project management. The project management is application of knowledge, skills, and tools and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. I thought maybe meeting the requirements isn't the best form of describing what the project is all about, so I made a little correct adjustment here. I say that every project should meet the goal, and then the objective could be that you meet the requirements, and then you can reach the goal. So not quite PMBOK, but we know what the project management is. I thought also, well, it's hybrid project management is about creativity. So let's discuss what the creativity is, right? And then I went to Wikipedia and look at the statement like creativity is phenomenon whereby something blah, 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 a joke, a composition, painting, similar things, they are all considered to be creativity. So I say, why? And I especially like this etc, like etc. But etc. stands for end of thinking capacity. So I say, well, let's help Wikipedia to finish the sentence properly, and I put the hybrid project management there. So this is the part where you have to laugh. So yes. So now when we know what the project management is, and we know why the context matters, and we know what the creativity is, we may have a definition of, what project management excellence, because hybrid and ability to use a couple of different methodologies, apply different way of works in a single project is a creative work of project managers. So let's say that project management excellence depends on ability to creatively assess the context and apply different tools, techniques, and skills to reach the project goal. Let's go further. Another confusion when we speak about excellence of project management is, agile versus waterfall comes from understanding that there is a difference between a process and the life cycle. And the life cycle I use in terms of methodology. Let's say that's two similar things, at least in my world. So this is the process. I think we will not argue about the fact that every project needs to be initiated, it needs to be planned, it needs to be executed, and it needs to be controlled and closed. Does anyone want to argue about this? No, because every project starts and finishes, right? We don't say how we plan, we don't say how we execute, and that's why we say this is a process which is applicable to every project. Now, if we put it like this, it tells a little bit already like, okay, what do we mean by plan, control, execute? Why two of them are very closely connected? Do you want to say something about iterations or similar things? Well, doesn't matter. But I just say that information displayed in the same information displayed in another way can connotate with different things. So, and this is already closer to the methodology. So the process and the methodology. Methodology can tell you what do you do in the initiation phase. Let's say you create a project charter. In the planning, you use a backlog, you produce a release plan, high-level design, and you execute in small iterations where each of iteration ends with some product which is already working. You monitor, right? Because we cannot tell if we're successful or not if we don't measure anything. So we have to monitor the progress. We have to use the burn-down charts to understand whether we are on the right track from time-wise and let's say scope-wise. And every project needs to be closed. We already discussed that a little bit. So takeaway like this. There is only one project management process with a start and an end, regardless the life cycle used. Any comments on that? Okay, the famous thing. I used Agile and Waterfall myself, but I had been, during those 4 years since I created this presentation in 2012, I read a lot of articles, I discussed with many people, and we agreed that maybe using those two things is just misleading, as I discussed with, or as I said in the very beginning of this presentation. So maybe we should use the adaptive versus the plan-driven. Maybe it makes more sense to put those two words instead of Agile and Waterfall, even though those sounds very dramatic here, and maybe it's more catchy, and then it's easier to discuss. But I decided to use those two. So the purpose of this part of the presentation is to tell you guys that none of them are good or bad. They are just the tools which is in your arsenal. As a project manager, you should be able to pick the right tool for the right project, just like someone said before me on the stage. I don't remember which one particularly. So what is similar between adaptive and plan-driven? They are using the same process. We already agreed on that. They all start and they all finish. They just do it differently. What they use different, the language differs, right? We don't have product owner or scrum master. The roles are different. The metrics, burn down charts, because agile people burn things. And you know, in traditional metrics, we use this earned value measurement. So we earn things instead of burning. So the life cycle is different. The language is different. Roles are different. Metrics are different. So the plan-driven is detailed planning up front. We know that. It's one step at a time, and one thing finishes, and only then we start. Of course, we can speak about using some other techniques, like doing in parallel and similar technologies, but let's say that one step at a time. All steps are laid out, and dependencies are mapped. Plan-driven approach is very good in dependency mapping. We cannot argue about that. So, but there are good and bad about waterfall, right? Or let's say the plan-driven approach. It's best known for dealing with the physical projects, not with all. Reliable future project forecast because of the detailed planning in the beginning. Defining tasks, phases must be accomplished in a particular sequence. Now, what is criticized for, of course, is for the software developer. So I'm not saying that waterfall can be applied for the software development projects in the best possible way. Maybe it could. I haven't seen that. Scope changes are usually slow. Yes, of course, if we spend tremendous amount of time in the very beginning to plan everything, then of course we are reluctant to change later. That's obvious thing. It's a psychology. Requires substantial scope and schedule planning before work begins. Yes, but then we reduce the scope that, you know, we may have some ambiguity around the scope, and if we talk about 5 million project budget, then maybe we should do some little bit more of upfront planning before we actually kick off. So adaptive, flexible, blah, blah, you know, all these things which are probably known for you, iterative, collaboration. I'm not gonna, you know, read that for you. You know it by heart, I believe. So, but there is good and bad about Agile as well. So, it's very good with the software and service-oriented projects, definitely. Engagement and collaboration empowers team to work creatively. Quick course correction because you did not waste a lot of time in the very beginning of the project, so it's easier to change later. But it's criticized for high risk due to uncertainty around triple constraint in the very beginning of the project. Therefore, I say that all the projects which are very big in the budget, they may have this constraint by management that please do a little bit proper planning before we sign off your project charter and you go into execution. Continuous hard work with backlog. This is especially a very difficult task for the guys who had been working previously in a waterfall project, because you just plan everything, you file 170 pages of specifications, you pull them to the execution teams and you forget and you lay back. In Agile, it doesn't work like that, right? We keep engaging business analysts and again, every iteration, rework the backlog, prioritize the backlog, re-estimate, break down the user stories. So it's criticized for that, but I think it will change over the years. People will get used to that type of work. So as you see, there's no good and bad. There is just the wrong tool for the particular situation and the right tool for the particular situation. And hybrid project management, to me, is when you assess the context and creatively apply different ways of work with different teams if you believe this is the best way for this particular project. And I'm going to tell you about the project I had. I had been leading as a project manager, one team agile way, another team more plan-driven way. This is not my invention, hybrid project management. A lot of people talk about it, write about it, and there are many other ways of defining hybrid. So others say that it's water, scrum, fall. Some others say it's collaborative model. Some of companies, they call it our process. Sometimes I even say whatever works, right? So yeah, you can find a lot. If you put these into the search engine on a web browser, you may find a lot of different schemes. You can analyze them and take from those schemes. You can take whatever you like. So the most interesting probably part is how to. So there was a little theory or background before I wanted actually to jump into the real example of how this works. That's how stereotypically we start Agile projects. We say, hey, let's do Agile without really understanding why we do Agile. And is it a proper philosophy to apply for our project? Because sometimes it happens that people come back from conferences like that saying, hey, I heard that Agile is very cool, let's do Agile, blah, 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 blah. So, whoa. You know, the context first. Size of organization, the legal dependencies and all this stuff we need to check before we actually decide on the methodology. So, we're going to try something called Agile. That means no more planning and no more documentation. Just start writing the code and complaining. Yeah, you laugh because these are stereotypes, right? We laugh from ourselves. I'm glad it has a name. Yeah, that was your training. And then, you know, teams go out and try to apply the Scrum framework, and whatever they do, actually, if they manage the backlog in not the proper way, they still do the waterfall project with understanding that they do Scrum. If they plan the backlog in the way that they deliver 100% of the first feature first, then 100% of the second feature, it's not the minimum viable product strategy. So Agile means documentation, but the proper level of documentation. Okay, I'm not saying that no documentation or too much. It means continuous planning. Yes, we do embrace the complaints, and you know, we had a separate session about retrospectives. Dimitri also mentioned what retrospectives means to him, that we just need to check or, you know, to catch up with the teams, or let's say the stand-up where we just have time to speak about something to waste the time. Anyway, so what do you need if you want to do the hybrid project? These are my findings, and maybe not rocket science for those guys who have experience. So firstly, of course, assess the context, whether this is the right, proper tool for you. Respect the fact that one process, so you still have to initiate, plan, execute, monitor, and close the project, right? So you have to plan what you're going to do per each phase. The minimum viable planning. Produce project charter to support hybrid delivery, because I came, let's say, yes, in Adform we have less processes and less structures, but in my previous company with 90,000 people all over the world, there were very strict processes how we do projects. So I was doing actually Agile project without my management knowing it. But I filed in the project charter, I wrote down that, okay, there is a process, I like the process, it's fine, but I'm gonna tailor the process a little bit. And they did sign it off, so I'm cool with that. I had a support to do the project in a hybrid way. Acquire and develop a dream team. And we had quite a few sessions already about, you know, the Tuckman forming, storming, norming, and performing, all the stages. You will have to work as a good leader if you want to get the dream team with you. And then, you know, you can do hybrid project or whatever project. If your team fails, then no process will help you. Develop single project schedule release plan. I'll show you what I mean by this. Capture project and product scope. This is important part. Set up common reporting and metrics. This is very difficult if you want to combine two different styles of project management into one. Then you have to choose which one to dominate, because you cannot have two metrics without any consistency. Sell this idea to stakeholders. That's the easy part, right? But if you're confident about what you're going to do, you prove that you're a professional project manager, and you walk the talk, then it's probably most likely will be easy to sell this idea to stakeholders. So I had two teams. One team working on a development part of software development part, another team had to set up the infrastructure for the solution. So those guys who are infrastructure guys, they were used to work more plan-driven because, you know, infrastructure projects are almost, okay, I'm very careful about saying this, almost the same all over and over again. You have to set up 100 servers, you have to set up 200 servers, you have to make connections, you have to build the firewalls between, and so on and so forth. Almost, okay? I'm not saying always the same. So they said, hey, Laimonas, we don't really know what this Agile means. Let's just do how we always did, and that's it. The other guys were developers. So with the development team, we decided to do Agile way. And we decided that the development team actually drives the project and drives the process. So we adopted Agile process on the top, Scrum process on the top, and the plan-driven on the bottom. I'll show you how. And we had some good conditions for the development because it was dedicated and collocated, and a little bit more difficult situation with the infrastructure team because it was virtual and on estimated effort basis, so it was not a dedicated team. So, differentiate between product and project scope. Can you differentiate between two? Yeah, because the product is the product and the project is everything what you need to do the product. So including the documentation we need to produce and training for the support teams and similar stuff. Infrastructure requirements and product requirements. We documented product requirements in the backlog and infrastructure requirements in Microsoft project. How cool is that? I'll show you how it works. Magic behind estimates. Estimating the product backlog was a difficult part because the project was estimated to run 10 months. So the backlog was not like really huge thing, but it was pretty huge. And estimating infrastructure setup was easy because it was repetitive work, and you know, those guys had been doing the infrastructure work before, so it was easy to use the historical data for them. Estimating release plan. We decided to do 3 releases during the project. The first release with the minimum viable product, and the second one and the third one was just bigger enhancements to that. What was new for me, it was adding management and coordination effort on top of what is estimated in the backlog. So those guys who know Scrum or Kanban way of work well, you know that it's not very easy to add these type of work into the backlog. But we managed to do it with a Microsoft project. I'll show you how. Choosing the methodology. Very basic thing. If you know the problem and you know the solution, maybe the plan-driven approach will work better for you. This is what we agreed with the infrastructure team. If you know the problem but you don't know how to solve it, maybe the Scrum works better. This is what we agreed with the development team. So that's how we ended up in a hybrid project. And this is the key slide. And this actually displays that the application development team has driven the whole project. We say, here you can see delivery of test and stage environment. We don't need the test and stage environment before we actually finish the first sprint. So what we agreed, okay, by the time we finish the first sprint, those environments should be ready. So we built this small waterfall with the infrastructure team to say, okay, when do we need to start the infrastructure work to make sure that by the time the first sprint is over, the environment is actually ready and the development team can actually deploy their code and do the testing and all the stuff, what they need to do. And the same thing goes with the production environment. We said, the first release we're going to do, the minimum viable product, will not go into production. Well, it will go into production, but we will not enable this to end users. So we said, with the release 2, we will go into production, go live, and similar stuff. So we don't need production environment up until then, because if we deploy the production environment earlier, it means we use the costs inefficiently. We deploy the production environment and we don't use it. So let's only deploy then when we need it. So we build another small waterfall there. You want to see how this looks like in a Microsoft project? It looks like that. Who has worked with Microsoft project? Okay, cool. So you see sprints are there. We don't say what kind of tasks we have within sprints. We just say, yes, there are sprints. They have their own capacity, they have amount of hours within each sprint, but we don't tell which particular scope they will deliver. So this is like capacity management plan. You know how, you can see a little bit of the planning also when it comes to the testing part. This is how it looked like in real with the development team. We had nice Scrum board with the in progress to verify and done. This is how it looked with the infrastructure team. The same Microsoft project file, just another part of the file, was particularly designed for the infrastructure team. So they had already their scope and the tasks planned in here. So this is how it worked. It may look now very easy to do, but it was hell difficult to think how to really manage Agile project using Microsoft project software. I'm going to skip that because of the lack of the time. But this is a cool book to read, How to Manage the Teams. And if you were interested in this Tuckman model presented by a few speakers, on top of that, please read the 5 dysfunctions of the team, because it makes sense in Agile world. Another thing which I would say, on top of the process itself, which I said, you know, Agile process, plan-driven, you should work with your team on ground rules as well. You know, we had the session where the guy said, well, during the retrospective, you can discover little by little what the ground rules you should use. But if you have experienced guys enough, before you start project, sit down with the team, agree on the rules, execute. That's it. Another very important thing, definition of done. This has a lot to do with the quality. And I decided not to give you a lot of text. I wanted you to go through definition of done one by one. Coded, implemented, peer-reviewed. Code is run against the current version in a source control. Code is commented and source control and check it in. Story use case manually tested. Unit test, behavior-driven development test written and all green. All green. 90% of the code coverage achieved. Build and package changes are communicated to build master. Task hours are updated, logged in a Jira. We use Jira from the software point of view and board from the physical point of view. All to-do items in code are completed. And then when you have this done, that's it. So the hybrid effect, okay. Cultural shock for delivery teams, a little bit. Dependency mapping challenge, definitely very big challenge to understand the dependencies, but I tried to manage the dependencies between the two teams on an upper level without the really digging deeper into, and you know, you could say I was just lucky without big problems in dependency mapping, but just to tell you, it was a huge challenge with Agile team. Little waste on planning, first iteration only. So we planned only first release, and based on the first release estimation, we built the plan for the second and the third. So we didn't like plan the whole project at the beginning, but you know, the client was persistent enough to have more details before execution. 40% of initial requirements were replaced based on a looped feedback cycle. This is what Agile people love to see. So you see, if we had planned the whole project, 40% of our plan would have been removed as a waste. So thanks God we didn't do that. And this is true numbers, I did not invent them. High quality and robust solution, initial scope delivered 3 weeks earlier. So this is not only because of the process we have chosen to do, but it was also because of the ground rules, because of the definition of done, and because of the team which was developed like really from the human resources point of view or leadership point of view. Happy client, happy team, next offer, meet corporate audit and regulation requirements. This is the funny part because, as I said, upper management didn't even know that I was doing the project in Agile way. The takeaways to finish. Firstly, don't look for one process, one tool to fit it all. It's fundamental impossibility. You have to have the arsenal of the tools. I say, there's no good and bad wine. It's the wine you like. But of course, if you have tried 2 types of wine in your life, then you can only choose between 2. But if you have tried 30 or 20%, not percent, 20 types of wine, then you have broader variety to choose from. This goes with the fish, this goes with the meat, and similar stuff. Choose one dominant methodology, because if one should dominate. Don't speak of the methodologies. It doesn't really matter as long as you deliver, right? And if something doesn't work, don't stick with it. And the very last takeaway, and maybe the most important one from my point of view, be creative about delivery and focus on people and the value, because people don't follow processes, people follow people. So you can invent whatever processes you want. But still you have not to forget you work with the people, and it's your team who delivers. And a few challenges I want to keep or leave you with is bring agile values to hardware development. This is still something I haven't tried. Stopping misuse of words waterfall and agile just because it sounds cool or it's a stereotype we can laugh at. And finding the right amount of structure and processes to avoid the chaos. And this is end of my thinking capacity here. I'm sorry I took a few minutes longer than I expected, but hopefully you enjoyed it. So, do we have time for one or two questions?
Да, спасибо за доклад. Коллеги, у нас есть время на один хороший вопрос.
Хороший вопрос.
И, пожалуйста, задайте его на английском языке, потому что у нас тут, сказать...
Можно и на русском.
Ну, ответит вам на английском.
Ну, отвечу на английском.